The international standard ISO IEC 17025 addresses all of the requirements for equipment in clause 5.5. The laboratory must have all of the items of equipment necessary for the correct performance of the tests or calibrations conducted in the laboratory. And this includes all of the equipment necessary for the preparation of the samples, preconditioning of the samples, and storage of the samples. For example, a laboratory involved in the testing of coal may be required to grind the samples to a specified particulate size. The grinding apparatus is an essential part of the equipment necessary for the correct performance of this test. Likewise, samples may have to be preconditioned to the necessary temperature, and for this reason, dedicated storage racks and fridges may be necessary. Laboratories will, of course, also be required to have all of the necessary equipment required to perform the tests or calibrations, and these requirements will obviously be specifically tailored to suit the activities of the laboratory. Computers and specific software packages have become an integral part of equipment inventory in any laboratory. Computers, in conjunction with word processing and spreadsheet software, have been used extensively for the preparation of test reports and calibration certificates, as well as performing repetitive tasks such as calculating the uncertainty of measurement associated with the calibration or test. In addition, computers are often linked to dedicated test or measuring equipment and are able to capture large quantities of data, and when used in conjunction with appropriate software, are able to manipulate and perform calculations on the data and then present the data in an appropriate format which can then be included into a calibration certificate or test report. Typically off-the-shelf software, that is commercial software packages such as spreadsheets and word processing programs, do not have any specific need to be validated. But any spreadsheet prepared by the laboratory using these software packages must be validated. One of the most common uses of computers is to perform calculations of measurement uncertainty for the calibrations or tests performed in the laboratory. And these spreadsheets are often written by the laboratory staff themselves. It is essential that these software packages be adequately documented so that when the time comes for them to be updated, the person given this responsibility is able to understand the original programming philosophy that had been followed. Validation must include an evaluation of all the calculations performed within a spreadsheet to ensure that each calculation produces the correct and expected answer. This is often achieved by using a calculator and manually calculating the uncertainty to ensure that all of the results are the same as would be expected, and then documenting these calculations, which must be maintained along with a printout of the spreadsheet using the same data. There is no specific requirement in ISO IEC 17025. However, clause 5.4.7.2 does make it a requirement for the data stored on computers to be protected to ensure both its confidentiality and integrity. ISO IEC 17025 also requires that computers, in other words the hardware and software, be maintained so as to ensure their proper functioning. Anybody who has been struck by a computer virus and subjected to the loss of data will understand the necessity for ensuring that computers used in the laboratory, and especially those connected to the internet or from which data is either uploaded or downloaded using a memory stick, is adequately protected using an up-to-date virus package. Obviously, there's an expectation that all new equipment will operate at least as accurately as claimed in its specifications. In some instances, the equipment may even be supplied with a calibration certificate. ISO IEC 17025 does, however, require that equipment, before being placed into service, be calibrated and checked to ensure that it meets the laboratory specification requirements. For equipment supplied with a calibration certificate, it is important to evaluate if the calibration certificate was issued by an appropriate authority, which has the appropriate recognition. In other words, was it issued by a laboratory that's been accredited by an ILAC full member, or was it issued by a National Metrology Institute, which has their CMCs included in the key comparison database? For equipment supplied with a calibration certificate, the first consideration is whether the equipment was calibrated by a laboratory that has the appropriate recognition. In other words, was the laboratory accredited by an accreditation body, which is a full member of ILAC, or a National Metrology Institute, which is a member of the BIPM and has the CMCs listed in Appendix C of the key comparison database? Or was the calibration certificate simply a factory or work certificate, typical of those issued by manufacturers? Secondly, check the calibration certificate to ensure that the calibration covers the specific ranges at the appropriate uncertainties necessary for the testing and or calibrations to be performed in the laboratory. Where equipment has not been supplied with a calibration certificate and for traceability purposes calibration is necessary, the next step is to arrange for the calibration. Before being placed into service, the laboratory must ensure that the equipment is functioning correctly. This may be achieved by measuring or testing something for which you already have a result or value. For example, this could be a reference material or a certified reference material in a testing laboratory, or in a calibration laboratory, it could be the measurement of a standard artifact such as a standard resistor. Electronic balances are normally checked and adjusted before use using a calibrated mass piece or weight. It is important that whenever equipment is checked, either before being placed into use or returned to use or on a scheduled basis, that appropriate records be maintained. This will allow the laboratory to see if the equipment is slowly drifting or producing erratic results. The laboratory should also establish control limits, and if the results are outside of these limits, a procedure must define what action should be taken. For example, removing the equipment from use until it can either be recalibrated, replaced, or repaired. ISO IEC 17025 is once again clear on the requirements for the records for equipment that need to be maintained. And these are listed in clause 5.5.5. The most obvious records to be maintained include things like the description, identification of the equipment, the manufacturer, model and serial numbers, and the location of the equipment, date of purchase and date when the equipment was placed into service. This information could also be stored on an equipment card, which also could be part of a computerized system. Useful information to be kept could also be a copy of the original purchase order and invoice, and this should be available along with the equipment instructions. These instructions are normally supplied in a manual or booklet or file, and on some occasions they're supplied on a CD disc. The equipment records must include copies of the calibration certificates, which in turn must also be kept in the place where the equipment is to be used, where it is necessary to apply corrections. Copies of the records of all maintenance conducted and a maintenance plan where necessary also need to be kept. The laboratory must also establish a calibration plan or schedule. The calibration plan will be influenced by factors such as 1. The type of equipment. For example, a mass piece or a gauge block are less likely to drift than any electronic item. 2. The associated risk. For example, the consequences of the equipment being out of calibration. And 3. The calibration history. Where the equipment has shown itself to be adequately stable, then the calibration interval could be extended. Lastly, the laboratory must maintain records of all of the checks or internal calibrations conducted on the equipment by the laboratory staff. These records demonstrate that the equipment has been maintained in a condition such that it is possible to produce reliable and consistent measurement results. Any equipment that is suspected of giving incorrect or unreliable results must be removed from use and not used until it has been repaired or recalibrated. The laboratory must ensure that it is not possible to inadvertently use the equipment. This can be achieved by isolating the equipment either on a distribution board, the electrical distribution board, or by removing the electrical plug from the wall socket. And then clearly labeling the equipment showing that it is not to be used. Finally, the laboratory must examine the possibility and consequences of any incorrect results being sent to customers. Calibration laboratories may be required to recall equipment for it to be recalibrated.